Hi guys, I'm very sorry to do a second live tonight, but I've had an awful lot of people message me and ask for my opinion. I don't know why people are asking for my opinion over the Yellowhammer document. I've been searching, going through a few of the points, etc., etc., and I have the document here. So the government today released 5 pages, although it says 6 on the official thing, but the last page is blank. They've released 5 pages of their planning, which is called the Yellowhammer document, which you might have seen, about what they are going to do in the situation, or as they put it, Her Majesty's Government's reasonable worst case planning assumptions. And that's the very big key here, okay? It's their worst case, written there right at the top. Worst case doesn't mean it's going to happen, doesn't mean that it's going to all come to fruition. It means some may not, and what this is a document for is the government is clearly showing all of the issues that could arise as a result of leaving the EU with no deal. It can be a little harrowing at first to read, but to understand it, I think, is you have to understand that with any big company, and I've had a couple and I've been involved with a few, when any time a big company makes decisions, they do a risk assessment. They do a risk assessment of everything, and this is just a large risk assessment. That's what it is. To say, once we come out with the EU with no deal, if that is the situation, this is what may happen. It also gives them a great idea of how to mitigate against all of that. So I've got a link up on the page. You can download this directly from the government. Don't get it from any third party where it can be manipulated. Get it straight from the government. There is a link on the Put Britain First page. I'm just going to go over just a few quick things now because people have asked me about it. Like I say, these are only my opinions. They're not associated with any particular political party. They're just my opinions on what I've seen. I am not a lawyer. I am just an average Joe, a family man, 4 children, and a job and all sorts of things, suffer with medical conditions as most of you do. So I'm just going to give everyone my 2 penneth worth, if you like. I'll just go from the key planning assumptions. Freight flow. Now, there is going to be some teething problems, all right? I think everybody's accepted that. And most of the teething problems are going to be from Dover to Calais by the sounds of it. So let's look at the negative. It's going to cause massive tailbacks onto the Dartford, around to Dartford and on the M25. We know that. That's a big part of the issue. But there is a positive to it as well. There is a load of other ports on that side of the country that can be utilised to actually ease the traffic flow. So where I live, you've got Hull and Immingham and Grimsby ports. You can use all of these. And obviously Lowestoft and everything up and down the village. Sorry, I was just reading an email. Up and down the country, so they can spread the load. Okay. Number 2, small number of instances where impacts will be felt negatively in the EU and the UK. Well, of course it is. Trade is going to be disrupted, not just coming into the UK and going out. So there's going to be disruptions on both sides. So both sides will want to work together. And as much as people don't like to hear this, the truth of the matter is they're going to want to work together. Business will want to trade, I can assure you. I can assure you Mercedes, Volkswagen, and all the other German-built cars are going to be banging at Angela Merkel's door to sort the issue out and to sort it now. So don't be under any illusions that they're just going to sit there with their arms crossed, because they won't. Now, France will have to impose all the EU mandatory controls, but it's quite interesting to read on the government's document that it says that they've actually already built the infrastructure and IT system to manage the processed and customs declarations, support a risk-based control regime. Now, it may slow up because businesses in the UK and the EU haven't actually got their act together and sorted out so it can trade and move pretty quickly. Now, that will ease as time goes on, and it's like anything, getting used to these new regimes. Also, of course, there's going to be slight delays on going in and out of Europe. And the same the other way around, just with the extra customs checks that need to be done unless something's going to be sorted out. So, you're going to have to expect that. Now, the energy problems, we were all told that we're not going to have electricity and gas. According to this, is bullshit. Right? Now, we are going to have it, and it could end up being more expensive because some of the EU companies, some of the EU companies may pull out. They may pull out. and therefore the prices may go up. But the government will regulate, as it already is, that they cap the energy prices. Okay, so don't feel threatened too much about it. There may be in the short term, for a family such as mine, which is on the lower income level, there may be in the short term a little bit of pinching going on, but I'm pretty sure that we're all being made aware of it. They're also they're talking more about distribution that we know we've already discussed a little bit before. I'm going to just quickly fly through these that I've seen. Now, obviously, things like drugs and medications and stuff that has short shelf life. They're saying in the document that it's, the waiting time for some of this could be affected. And remember, this is a worst case scenario. Okay, we all know that there could be problems, and it will work itself out. It's not like this is going to be a problem forever and ever and ever. Amen. There's obviously fresh food, which is an issue because it comes in from Europe. But make no mistake about it. All of the fresh fruit produce companies that send their food to the UK do not want their food rotting at the dock. Okay, so whilst it may be slightly delayed, they don't want it rotting at the dock because it becomes worthless and costs them money. Then I can assure you they will go to their own governments and start complaining that they're losing huge revenues because the UK just won't buy shit stuff. So, you've got to put that in there. Also, obviously, the drugs companies, if they don't sell it, they won't be able to make money. So just think about it on that level. There will be ways of this stuff getting through. They might not be able to go through Dover as freely, but they can move and change ports. You watch. They'll come through places like Hull and Immingham, where I am, and all up and down the country. Felixstowe, Lowestoft, that area. They'll start pulling it in from there, all on the EU side. So there will be backup plans in place. I mean, what you're seeing here is this official document. So everybody who's on the side of Brexit will take the document that you've got here. That there is a link in on the Put Britain First site. There is a link so you can actually download this. But every side that's on the side of Brexit will find the way around this, and every side that's against it, the Remainers, etc., will find a way to use this as a political object that scares the hell out of people. Okay, but what you've got to get in mind is the document says on what could happen. So always public water won't be affected at all. However, obviously the chemicals they use to clean it may be slightly delayed at the docks. But once again, these things will move. Remember, it's business wanting some money. Some cross-border UK financial services, that doesn't affect you and me in everyday life, I don't think. Although, like I said, I'm not an expert. The EU will not make data decisions to share with the UK. Well, that's a criminal thing, and there is other sort of pieces in place, and obviously we don't want criminals and stuff. Well, that's very true, Jacqueline Wyatt. Yeah, and not every medicine comes from the EU. And more importantly, most medicines can be located outside of the EU. Now, think about the fact that people would be moving factories and storage units to put them outside of the EU for easy use of access into the UK. So, we do have to make sure. Now, the bit that really concerns me, point 11, UK nationals will lose their EU citizenship. Okay, we won't be able to go into the EU. But more importantly, most of the people who live, the UK nationals who live in the EU, will lose their rights, even though we guarantee that EU nationals living in the UK, they have their rights. So that's a part of it where this is where it comes back to the best endeavours. Do you remember that? We'll try best endeavours to get out of the backstop. Now, when you've got the EU operating like that don't reciprocate the deal, don't say, well, UK nationals are here, that's fine, they'll get the same rights as EU nationals there. They haven't done that, right, in a lot of the member states. So that tells you all you really need to know right there. But it is an issue. So you've got to be aware of all that. Obviously, you're going to just, those of us who've gone to the States and been lucky enough to go outside of Europe are quite aware of visas and, of course, holiday insurance, etc., because, of course, the E111 is not going to count anymore. Yeah, Stuart Clifford, yeah, it was true. I heard that as well. My only concern is stockpiling of body bags. Right, okay, so let's put it into what they're saying here is anyone that everybody's at risk, and the no flu jab's going to be available, and all the rest of it, and people are going to die in massive droves. It's like going to be a big cull of the British. Then of course the French and the Germans can just walk over because we'll all be dead. It's just you're going to hear all these negative stories. You are going to hear it. The UK government is going by this, saying they are aware of what the risks are, and they will be aware of how to solve them, or at least do as little damage as possible. And remember, body bags are probably made in Europe, so they'll want to get them in pretty quick, wouldn't they? I mean, getting it across. I mean, there's lots of problems that might happen in Gibraltar because it's borders Spain, but mostly it's just delays, as you've got to expect. I mean, if you want my advice, don't go to Europe for 6 months after we exit. You'll save yourself all the problem. Then you leave as much traffic to flow through for trade. It talks about regional traffic delays in Kent. Well, of course, we know the problems with Dover. It might take 1.5 to 2.5 days to get there. But just remember, these will all be teething problems, and the French will want them as well, because remember, the bloc will be the other side of everyone trying to come in. So they will have these issues for their side, so they're going to want to resolve it real quick. And remember, you're talking billions and billions of pounds worth of trade. We're not really interested in the small minority of insurance payments delays, are we? No? Okay, good, me either. Low income... Yeah, it does say low income groups will be disproportionately affected by price rises in food and fuel. Her Majesty's Treasury. Right, so, realistically, everything affects the poor most. When prices rise, that is going to happen. How the government cope with that, nobody knows. This document is saying what might happen. We haven't got the document that tackles each problem that says what they're going to do about it. And that bit, I think, will probably come next. They're not going to put... they say Her Majesty's government will operationalise the no new checks with limited exceptions model announced on the 13th of March. So, we're not putting anything more on it. It's down to the EU. And remember, the big argument over the backstop is who's going to build the border. Boris Johnson says, well, we ain't. So the argument is, if the EU want to put it up, then they're in effect blocking the Good Friday Agreement, right? So we'll just have to see how that pans out. As I say, I'm not a politician. I'm certainly not a lawyer. I'm a computer science freak. Okay, so it also talks about... they of course they don't. Jacqueline White, no, they don't want to lose. The thing is, what you've got to remember is countries aren't run by governments, they're run by business, okay? The Black Vulture report, no, I don't. I didn't even know there was on there. I will try and find that then. Or is this your name you've given this? Yeah, I mean, the copy I've got, yes, I have got the copy of it. It is available. If you're talking about the Yellowhammer document, I've made it available, a link to the government website to get it, if you want to read it. Don't read resources like the BBC or the Sun. Whoever's side it's on will automatically make your own judgment from what you've got from the government, okay? It talks about fishing vessels. Now, that's going to be an interesting one, because on day one... then it would be illegal for any EU vessels to enter UK waters, whether it be Irish, Welsh, Scottish or English, and fish. So there could be a little bit of war going on there. So I can imagine some of our frigates being brought around to sort of set the boxing ring out, if you like. Because obviously, someone sent me something today which I found quite amusing. It said that any fish caught within British waters belongs to the EU, but any migrants caught in British waters belongs to the UK. That was quite an interesting one, and I know it's quite a slightly off topic, but it did make me chuckle and think, well, maybe, is it difficult to turn the boat round and send them back to France? But yeah, there's always, there's always pros and cons. Of course it will. Jacqueline McLaughlin. Is it McLaughlin? Yes, it is. Do apologise. It will sort itself out in time. It would have all been sorted if we had left when we should have. Exactly. Absolutely right. It will be sorted in time. It is just a time thing, as everything is. But like I said before, it's business that run countries. It's business that pay the bills. Obviously, the workers, etc., etc., but business hires those workers. Business is not going to want to be interrupted from both sides of this. Okay, both sides of this. You can't walk away from billions of dollars and billions of pounds of business. Believe me when I say that to you. Because they could say the EUK is going to go out, it's going to go bust. Hey, the EU is going to suffer more. It literally will suffer more. This report is the guy who who brought this up in the House of Lords the other day. It is the report of what could happen if we don't leave the EU. I didn't know about that, Stuart. I will hunt that, actually. I saw something today which was quite interesting, which was where some of the EU officials were laughing and telling each other, drinking wine, etc., that they were going to nail the UK into staying. It just seems to me, and I think that was some of the EU negotiators. You see, what the thing is, Boris Johnson scared the living hell out of them. And I wouldn't be surprised if you was to look at who's funding these court cases, that the money will trace back to the EU. The woman from the SNP said this morning, after it was announced that they found it unlawful, right? She said that money was raised via crowdfunding. Now that's interesting. Very, very interesting. Crowdfunding, if any of you don't know what that is where you go to the general public and the general public would fund whatever it is you're trying to do. It's been used for many years, from business investments, starting companies, to have breast enlargements. So that's what it is. But there's no real trace of where this money is coming from. So the question is, who funded it? And to take things to the Supreme Court, in the speed it's going, whether it's the UK government or it's this independent body or whoever, takes an awful lot of money, to the tune of millions of pounds. And they're managing to get something to the Supreme Court within 5 days. Now, obviously, the urgency of what it is, I can understand that. But it's costing us, the taxpayer, fortune. What do I think of Ollie Robbins' appointment to Goldman Sachs? Bloody don't really know. But I'm just being honest there. I mean, I don't know about the fella. I will do some research and give my opinions. Like I said, if you want a copy of this document, I would urge people, don't panic. That's the first thing I would tell you. Do not panic. This is a worst case scenario. It isn't a definite. The talk of people's going to cause rioting in the streets, I don't think so. When they talk about shortages, people will panic buy. Do you remember when they blockaded the fuel? They stopped it all the thing because they were protesting about the price of fuel going above £1. I don't know if people here remember that. And everybody was rushing to buy petrol. At that time, I was serving as a psychiatric nurse. Yeah, thank you, Stuart. I will look at that. I was working as a psychiatric nurse, so it didn't really affect me because I was working as a nursing system. I was able to get fuel. Obviously, I had to take my ID and everything, but I was able to get it. So that was when they blockaded all of the fuel ports, wasn't it? So, I mean, they're talking. It is a worst case scenario, but try and look at it as just that. Doesn't mean everything's going to happen. You've got to sort of. I think one of the encouraging things are the government has identified what they are going to look at. They have understood what it is. So when they bring in medications that are seriously needed, they're going to be obviously prioritised and flown in to make things easier. Things might become a little bit more expensive on the shelf because it'd be easier to send the freight through sea freight or send it through air freight. So things might be slightly delayed. But the UK government is thinking about that now. Okay? Thinking about it now. What I would say to people is, if you really want my advice on what I think from this, I think the only thing I'm a bit worried about is food shortages. Not that I need it, as you can clearly see. But what I'm thinking of is food shortages. I might buy another freezer and stock up with frozen vegetables and bits and pieces that can see us through the tough couple of weeks. But, these are things that the government are thinking about. It's not a rush decision. It's not something that they've just sprung out, so they will be looking into that. And I'm pretty sure they're not going to let the people of the country die. They're not going to let the people of the country go without. They do help the poorest, and they will help the poorest in society because things will demand that. The other bit of adult social care with companies going bust because of high staff prices, etc., etc. There is threats of that with all businesses, but remember, it's not just on our side of the water this is happening. It's on theirs as well. So believe you me when I tell you that their companies based in Europe will be panicking too. Okay, because they're not going to be able to sell their goods into a massive market like the UK. And also, remember that American companies, Canadian companies, Australian, New Zealand companies, and all the other ones that you can do independent trade deals with will be chomping at the bit to replace them. There is 300 and something million people living in Europe. There is nearly 500 million people living in the United States, and probably another 150 to 200. No, I don't even know. I'm roughly guessing the figures of people that live around the globe where you can trade and get this stuff from elsewhere. So don't overly panic. Don't overly panic just yet. We don't really know how the government are going to deal with this. We know they've identified the issues, which is half the battle. It really is. And whoever wrote this document, which I think someone mentioned, Mr. Hammond, who now obviously is a staunch Remainer and a pain in the arse. It's just one of those things that it will get there. What was that? You look like a thumb with specks, you mongo. Asmo ven Mosopatima. Oh, that's nice of you. Thank you very much. So you are a clear indication of attack the messenger instead of paying attention to the message. So anyway, guys, that was just a very brief overview. My 2 pence worth. I was asked to provide it, and I do apologise for coming on so late at night. And please ignore Mr. Asmo von Maso. I'm very apologetic. Tamia. You know, I welcome comments from both sides. I welcome Remainers. I welcome Brexiteers. I'm just giving my opinion for what it's worth. Very little, I understand that. But I will say to you, third line down, reasonable worst case planning. You mad bruh. Obviously a common issue there. But once again, thank you very, very much for joining me. If you have any questions, you look like... you don't need to leave in personal insults, it's fine. Once again, if you have any questions that you think I can help with, like I said, I'm just an average guy, father of 4, married. I live in the middle of the country, or just a bit further to the north. You know, I'm an educated man, but I'm nowhere a politician. I'm certainly not a lawyer. But it's just, I feel I speak for the people because I represent one of them, because I live the way you or most of you live. So, you know, hand to mouth every day. So once again, thanks very much, and I do apologise for taking up some of your evening. If you had any questions on what you want, I'll be... have you got over 8,000 followers and only 10 people watching live? Yeah, I know. People just don't like the sound of my voice. Once again, thanks very much, guys, and take care. Any comments, I'm happy to answer. Cheers.